So I'm Bailey Whiteman. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I am currently, I don't know what we call it, maybe an at-large member of AUUMM. I have been a member for 5 years, and I started my own independent membership as of maybe November. I left a position I'd been in for 8 years at the end of September. And I will call on Sarah Jo.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jo, probably, because there are like 18 Sarahs in the AUUMM. I've been a member since about 2014, and I don't remember what I was supposed to say because this is my billionth Zoom meeting, and I've been dealing with my kids getting online. But I'm the music director at First UU in Syracuse, and my brain's fried. I'm sorry. What else do you need me to say?
Necessary. Thank you. If you want to tap somebody next for an intro.
Brian, did you get your microphone working yet?
Yes, I think I did.
Oh,
can you hear me?
It did. Yeah.
Nice. There we go. I'm Brian Seeger. I'm he, him, his, and I am an independent member of the association. I've been a member for about 4 years, and I'm based in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Thanks, Brian. You want to tap somebody else?
Yes, I'm gonna get my face close. I'm going to tap Elisa because I love her red background.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa, she, her, hers. I'm the lead music director for Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My colleague Tristan Strelitzer is our choral director. He's been more continually active in AUUMM, how we say it now, AUUMN former. I joined about 13 years ago when I started the job, and we really didn't have a professional expense budget. So I've been kind of intermittently involved, but as we've thankfully increased our music budgets, I've re-upped my membership around the Portland conference time. And last I checked, they'd sent my dues in and it looked like they weren't processed. So I was like chasing a check around. So I think I'm in good standing. But yeah, I'm also one of those people who posted hey, there's a thing about, who owns what. So I'm interested in that element of the organization in terms of our just professional standards within denominational issues that sort of suddenly I became aware of, but now that's a backseat to all of the online business that we're all dealing with. So here ends, I think that's everything you needed to know, right?
That was perfect. And I'll follow up with your dues if you're still not sure about that, Alyssa. Yeah. So let's take that up offline. I'll make a note of it.
Yeah.
And just FYI, folks, I am taking notes. So if you see me looking down, I'm a hand writer of notes. I have the pens and all the things. So you want to tap somebody else, Alyssa?
Sure. I'll tap Margaret.
Oh, hi. I'm Margaret Jers, and I am the music director at in Wausau at the first. That would be Wausau, Wisconsin, and at the First UU Church here. This is my second year of being a member, and my first meeting with all of you. So I'm excited to see what I can learn from all of you. Did I answer all of the questions?
You did, Margaret. Now, if you can just tap somebody else for an intro, that would be great.
Okay. How about Dana Mabin?
There, I think I'm unmuted. Yeah, Dana Mabin, you said my name right. Thank you. That's amazing. I am an interim music director in Northampton at the Unitarian Universal Society of Florence in Northampton and Florence. And I'm very new to online anything, and so I'm just here to see what I can learn about it.
Thank you for being here, Dana. Dana, can you see a participant list?
I have a list that has names and some pictures and some actual live stuff.
You want to call somebody to introduce himself next?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
How about Mark? Mark Brecker.
Brecky.
Brecky, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Mark Brecky. I am choir director at the UU Church in Livermore, California. Been there, this is my second year. Previous to that, I was about 11 years in Minnesota at UU Church in Minnetonka. And I've been in and out of AUUMM or UUMM, excuse me, based upon whether there's been funding at the church for the membership. That's about it. Oh, pronouns, he, him, his. All right. And I'll tag Philip Rogers.
Philip Rogers here. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. I'm with Northwest Unitarian Congregation in Sandy Springs, Georgia, which is pretty much Atlanta, Georgia. This is my third year with them as music director and choir director. And I'm here to learn as much as I can.
Thank you for being here, Philip. I actually work for another firm that is based out of Sandy Springs, so small world.
Yes.
You want to tap somebody else?
Okay. Has Alex introduced himself?
Not yet.
I want to tap Alex Peach. How do you pronounce your last name, Alex? I'm sorry.
Peach. Yeah.
And Alex is using virtual backgrounds.
Yeah. So this is my first Zoom ever. Music director at AUUMM, Unitarian Universalist Metro Atlanta North in Roswell, but suburbia Atlanta. And I went to the conference this past year. It was my first conference, and I've been a member for a year. So thanks for everybody's help so far with this whole Zoom thing. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. Do we see somebody else who hasn't given an intro and proper pronunciation of the names I'll butcher later? Just being real, people. How about Cheryl?
Hello, Cheryl. She, her, and hers. I am not a music professional, and I'm actually not a member of the association yet.
Welcome.
But I am participating in a brand new covenanting community that's emerging. And music is a big part of my spiritual practice, and so it's important to me that we establish a music program as soon as possible. And so I'm here to learn as much as I can.
Great. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here, Cheryl. Who haven't we heard from yet? Mary?
There. Mary Doan, Minister of Music at the First UU Society of Exeter, New Hampshire. There for 20 years. She, her, hers. Sometimes member of UUMN. Not sure currently. It depends on funding. Just here to learn more about how to do this worship thing online, which is hard. We've just had our first service this past Sunday, and it went reasonably well, but needing more help in that area. So that's why I'm here. And I don't think that Shayna has gone, so I'm going to call on her.
Hi, I'm Shauna Eisenberg. That's okay. Shayna is about half of the time usually. I live in New Hampshire. I'm the music director at, we call it UFIS for short, Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Eastern Slopes. The music director into my 5th year, so I've been a member for I think 4 years of AU. How are we pronouncing it? AUUMM. And we just had our very first online virtual service this past Sunday, and there were lots of complaints about the sound of my lovely grand piano. It sounds great at home. It did not translate very well across Zoom lines. So I'm hoping, of course, to learn more about that. Also, I'm a member, but I sent in a check and nothing has happened, and so I haven't been able to access the form for a couple of weeks. So I'd love to be on the list to figure that out later after the meeting as well. Laurice, thank you. And I think that's all for the moment. And I'm sorry, my background is so dark. I'm in a dark room, I guess, even with the lights on.
Well, thank you. Shauna, if you could shoot me an email with that information so that I have it to follow up on.
Will do.
That would be great.
Okay.
All right, I think that is everybody's name pronounced for me, and I have seen most everyone's face. So I'm not sure if you can hear my husband, who is an AU member. He's having a choir rehearsal via Zoom in the background, and they're just kind of covenanting, and it sounds like they're chanting. So I apologize if you can hear Marcus chanting in the background, or you're welcome, whichever one you choose. So would anyone like to start? I would love to hear your experience or thoughts about what AUUMM can do for you, what it has done for you, what you would like to see from the association. I understand that this is a difficult question to ask after the couple of weeks that we have had. And I understand it from a few of your introductions that you're hoping to get a little more like, how do we now? And we are working on some programming to get a roundtable together for folks to share ideas, to learn from each other. I'm not sure how much of work that we're going to do tonight, but we can certainly leave the room open afterwards if anybody wants to stick around and chat with colleagues, for sure. Would anyone like to start us off? I don't see any hands, so I'm going to go ahead and give you just a little bit of background on me and the process that brought me to AUUMM. I am a musical theater performer professional by training. Grew up in classical voice in the Midwest and moved over to nonprofit organizational management about 8 years ago, after having run and owned a restaurant for several years. I spent some years doing Broadway front of house management, working for a producer, worked in 5 different houses, worked for a dance company. So I have a very broad background, and one of the things that I find that I excel at is wearing lots of hats, and it keeps me very interested. So I think I'm very well suited in smaller organizations. So I started my UU career path with the Legislative Ministry of New Jersey, which is the state's action network. And while I was there, we were a 3/4 time staff, the half-time executive director and myself. And when I left to go back to work full-time, I have a 9-year-old daughter, the organization had grown to a full-time executive director and a half-time administrator outreach coordinator, and now have 2 full-time folks on staff there. And I'm hopeful that we can see some kind of similar growth here, because we have incredible volunteers, as I am finding very quickly within this association. But there is only so much that one can expect from volunteers who are already overworked and underpaid in their congregations at home. So that's definitely a goal for me. As the association, do see you, Mark, and you will be my first person that I go to. When the association changed a couple of years ago, changed mission, changed vision to go much more from I believe, a more informal network of colleagues to a professional association, the board at the time realized that there maybe needed to be some changes made, some organizational development, a new way of and opening up some revenue streams, building up membership, adding value to the membership. And so last year, the board decided to restructure the staff hours that they had. So previously there was a 30-hour executive administrator that has been split into a 20-hour, so a half-time executive role, and a 10-hour administrator role. So what's exciting is that they've brought in a new portfolio and someone to look at things differently. What's challenging is that we still have the same staff hours. So we're trying to figure out, working with the new drastically cut administrative position, how we make all of these things happen. And figure out this major transition. So I'm very excited by this board, and they are committed to diversifying our membership and adding value to that membership in the form of professional development, in the form of advocacy and education, which I'm sure some of you have been following along the advocacy work that they started with General Assembly Planning Committee last summer. And that conversation is not only about our membership at GA, but a broader cultural shift to a collaborative and respectful shared ministry. That was very exciting to me. So that's where we are right now. I live in New Jersey, and so I'm on the East Coast, and I'm worked for 2 now statewide nonprofit organizations, and I'm finding it a challenge to work nationally. So I have colleagues who are three hours behind me. Our president is in Portland. So finding a time that works for both of us can be a challenge, but I'm excited by it, and have really dove in headfirst to multi-professional organizations. So we're starting to open up conversations with the Ministers Association and the Liberal Religious Educators Association, Loretta, and are really looking to see where we can expand collaborative opportunities and really work on right relationship and a covenantal relationship between all of the professionals. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm excited by the turnout tonight. So as I said, I saw that Mark had raised his hand. So I'm going to stop talking and hear from you all. Mark, do you want to take the floor?
Sure. I've got limited time. I have to go run a choir gathering, not quite a rehearsal, but a choir gathering on Zoom fairly soon. So I've been in and out, as I said, and one of the reasons I've been in and out has been congregational support for funding. The other reason I've been in and out is the churches I've been in and the choirs I've led have been relatively small. And so I've had a parallel day career, as I think many of us have or have had. And taking time out to participate more in this organization, it wasn't supported by my congregation. They didn't often even see the value in it, and it meant that I would have to take time off of my day job. So it was vacation time. which meant it was extra expense essentially for me that was unsupported. Ways in which we could address that, small congregations, part-timers, resources for those leaders in music, which are different than the needs when you have a large congregation, a large choir, a large music staff, all of those kinds of things. And I've only attended one conference, AUUMM. It seemed a bit heavy on the side of large congregations, large music groups, and very light on the side of small. I went to all of the composers in the that were present, in the exhibit room, asking, what do you have for SAB choirs, for example, which many, many small churches, that's all we've got. Virtually nothing. And not even the recognition at that time of that need. And I think that's the main thing that in the limited time we have tonight that I'd like to raise is that need for small congregations, small choirs, small music groups, and support there that where we just don't have, we aren't paid enough, we don't have time to participate in the big kinds of gatherings, the big and the emphasis on the big groups. I don't know if that resonates with anyone else, but that's certainly what I've experienced in the last dozen years or so. And I'll stop and let other people talk.
Thank you for that, Mark. I can assure you, based on reading the broader survey results, that is a narrative that is familiar. Can I just ask for a frame of reference for me, how many hours you have at your congregation?
Well, the previous congregation, they nominally were saying 5 hours a week.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
One choir that sang once a month in service, once a month or every 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. This congregation, they started at 7.5 hours. They have 2 choral ensembles. They wanted choral music on 3 Sundays of the month. Mm-hmm. And I've been pushing them. I took the job basically because it was an opportunity with a big move from Minnesota to California. And I came in saying, look, one of the things I'm going to work with you as a congregation on is fair compensation for not only myself, and I honestly, it's not for myself. I personally have been fortunate. I don't need the extra income, but for others who follow me and others on the staff, I'm working hard toward fair compensation. And the whole idea of hourly is even a problem from my perspective. We are creative staff. From the IRS perspective, creative professionals should be salaried. And this idea that we have hours that we, are limited to, or that we have to turn in time cards every two weeks, that's really kind of offensive. That's another issue around being part-time, smaller churches, that kind of thing. It's all part of the just compensation question for me. Did that answer your question, or did I miss it?
It did. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do see that we have a couple of folks who joined us. I see Jed and Natasha have joined us. They happen to be 2 people who I know how to pronounce their names. But we did a quick introduction before so I could hear people's voices and see their faces. So if Jed or Natasha would like to give us a quick, hi, my name is, these are my pronouns, and this is what I do where.
I'm Jed Levine. Hi, everybody. I'm the music director at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Queens in New York. Very small congregation, but lively. And he and him are my pronouns. Thanks.
Okay, I'm Natasha Steinmacher. I'm Pronouns she, her. I'm the Director of Music Ministry at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And we're, I guess, like between 2 and 250 members.
Thank you. Welcome. I see a hand raised from Bailey Whiteman. Bailey.
Thanks. Mark, I just want to thank you. I really appreciate the issues you raised. And I do think they're super complicated. You maybe could not see my incredible bug eyes when you said that you had 2 choirs in 7.5 hours, because at the job I just left, which granted is a larger congregation, it would be mid-sized 2. Within the UUA, it was about 325 to 340 members by the time I left. I had an adult choir, a band that I was supervising. I don't teach people how to do band. They teach me how to do band. And children's choir that sang once a month. And the adult choir sang on average twice a month. And I was 20 hours full year. So I'm having a like, ooh.
Thank you for that perspective. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Also, I would like to say that as a currently, what is the terminology? I'm like a member in good standing, but I'm currently stepped back from being an active member of AUUMM, which is the Classical Singers Union, also the Professional Ballet Dancers and Stage Managers Union. I long advocated that we should talk to each other more about what we're actually paid, because the only people that benefit when we don't talk about what we're actually paid are the people who want to pay less. And that's not good for any of us, because I think within the context that you all are serving, it's incredibly important to acknowledge that that's not within the values of Unitarian Universalism to actually try to get away with something or to skimp. But it is what happens in practice an incredible amount. Obviously, you all know that. I will push back slightly, Mark, on the question of whether it's beneficial to be salaried or it's beneficial to be hourly. I think it's a sort of a plus minus, right? I see you're nodding. I think the plus of hourly is that there is the potential, I'm not saying it's the experience, but the potential to be more honest about how much work you're actually getting done. Because if you say, well, if you want me to do that, I would need to do 5 more hours this week, and they go, oh, maybe that's great. Because I think that, you know, the last time that I was in a budget cycle, I tried to go up to 22 hours to respond to the fact that I'd added a children's choir without adding any hours and didn't get the 2 hours. I also offered more Sundays because I felt like, I think it was at 26 Sundays that I ought to offer more like 28. But when I was told there was not going to be any more hours, I said, well, then there's not going to be more Sundays. Because at some point, if you're saying that there's no more money, then there's no more money, and we'll make do with what we're doing. So that's the only thing I'd say about that. Obviously, then there is the piece about, I'm not a person who would track my hours well. As a person with ADHD, that executive function piece would be, so then I actually would be more tense in a job where I had to log. So I'll acknowledge that salaried was beneficial for me. And so the things beyond all of that, Laurice, that I hope that AUUMM is able to continue to do for everyone and support is this question of how we make it more possible for people to participate in the kinds of professional development that I've definitely experienced through AUUMM. I've definitely heard other people say recently that if we could make the music leader certification program more like the Renaissance modules that Loretta offers, most of which happen virtually, which suddenly we understand how that might be a great thing in the last 7 days. Yeah, I see the hand up there from Melissa. That said, I won't lie, because Sarah, Joe, and Natasha, and Marcus, and Jed went through music leader certification. We were all in it, overlapping. And the year that we weren't required to take classes at conference, I did not get to know that cohort as well. And so I felt that real lack. And also at the time, the online versions of the classes didn't go well. I know it must be possible because otherwise Loretta wouldn't continue to offer Renaissance modules, but that was definitely a lack. So it's the, how do we do things well? And I stay in AUUMM. There was never any question that once I stopped having a position in a congregation, there was never a question of finding the money to join for myself, because you are my people.
Thank you, Bailey. And it looks like we have a new participant, and then I'm going to go to Alyssa. Some person with the same last name as me who I've never met joined. If he could correctly pronounce his name and pronouns and where you are and what you do, that would be very helpful. And for all, there were several that came in after we went through protocol. If you have something that you would like to share with me, an experience, whether it's positive or negative, or something that you would hope once we return to some kind of normalcy that you would benefit from your professional association, that you think your colleagues would as well, if you could just raise your hand and I will call on those folks as I see them.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laurice Grae-Hauck. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am in West Orange, New Jersey, in the room right behind Laurice. You could probably see my hand. No, okay. Glass door, okay. I serve the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Montclair, New Jersey. I am 3/4 time there, and I've been there since 2012.
Thank you, Marcus. Alyssa, I saw a hand, a physical hand from you.
Yeah, thanks. I just following up on what Bailey was talking about with the credentialing, or whatever it's now called. I, over the course of various years, had conversations with the senior minister who hired me, then the interim minister that I survived, and now a wonderful senior minister who's my current boss. But as various budgeting cycles and various salary recommendations came up, it was always this, well, okay, yeah, you have a master's degree, but you don't have this credential. Well, what makes the rest of my living is regional theater, and I have a pretty regular summer theater that I have a relationship with that I'm music directing at. So I've very rarely been able to attend the summer conference. There were a couple times I did go to Boston. I really enjoyed your workshop there, Marcus, on hymns and how to lead hymns from the piano. I remember that was excellent. So the handful of times that I've kind of dabbled in the moment that I might have been available for one summer, there never would have been a series of summers that I could have taken that. It was just not possible for me to make a living and pursue the credentialing, which then also limits my ability for the congregation that even is a large congregation that is, in small increments, but still with goodwill, trying to do the right thing by our music department. We're in probably a more flexible situation than many other places, although who knows what that future holds right now. Nevertheless, I really, that resonates with me. Just it feels like there's a group of people who are shut out, whether you're from a small congregation that can't see funding going to a conference, or you're from a large congregation but still have to make a living by cobbling together more than one thing, like most of us in the gig economy do. So that's a thing I'm really interested in. Also, just to follow up about the shift that you mentioned to really being a professional association. I think I recently learned that my congregation, because they're going through this extremely thorough and thoughtful and smart process of policy governance and shifting to looking at every single thing, that when they got to asset protection, they started looking at intellectual property. And then I ran into this thing, suddenly being told, there's a gray area around that, and realizing that I did not have an agreement. My degree is in music composition. I'm an ASCAP member. Thankfully, because my job was small, I haven't spent a ton of energy writing music for this congregation. But, I started a thread on the forum. I went to good offices. I did get a couple of sample templates of model agreements. But basically what I was really told is, well, the ministers, AUUMM had, lobbied for the ministers to own their sermons. So you know, we just want to do whatever the AUUMM says. So I have some informal things from AUUM members, but not like an official recommendation with the stamp of the organization. And I feel like that would be something that would be really beneficial to protecting, again, what sort of right relationship for composers who are also music directors, but you're not hired as a composer. That's not really your job, right? So most of these agreements, the ones that I looked at, had like limited licensing. For example, if you are the composer, you write a piece for your choir, there's an understanding that the congregation may use that, and you're not having to pay extra licensing for the use, but the composer retains the copyright. That seems to be the understood standard, but not explicitly stated with a lot of authority. And I think that would be, it's just important, I think, again, as we evolve, and especially in the land of trying to create online content, if people are starting to write more original material, if that's not protected, that's a concern. I will stop talking now. Thank you.
No, thank you for raising that, Alyssa. I see a lot of like vigorously nodding heads on my screen, and that is something new for me to hear. So I really appreciate I appreciate that. Any of the vigorously nodding heads? Philip needs to sign off. Philip, do you have anything you want to share before you head out?
Only that I concur with everyone else. My position is 10 hours a week, which is interesting because there's no way to do what I do in 10 hours. And we're having discussions with our board regarding increasing my salary. But, I understand that I'm not the only person having wage issues. And so it lessens the, hold on a second, this other thing is going on here. Okay, that thing is done. It's just I'm how do I say, gratified to know that it sounds really interesting. It's good to know that I'm not the only one having these issues, and hopefully they will be resolved for this wonderful group of talented musicians and creative artists, because I've seen the work that many of you have done at the conferences, and so I would only hope that our individual churches would, and congregations would, see the value in what we do and how much we love what we do. That's all I have to say on that at this particular point. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This has really been helpful to me.
Great. Thank you, Philip. I hope you have a good night. Be well. Brian, I see your hand, and before I call on you, I see that you have a stealth partner in the background, Cindy Scott. Do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. I'm Cindy Scott. I am she, her.
Hers.
Hers, yes. And I am not a music director at any church. I've been a long Unitarian, and I write music and kind of a troubadour, and I teach at Berkeley. And so in the world, I go out and often will end up at a Unitarian church presenting music somehow. So I just find this community beautifully inspiring, and glad to be here.
Hello.
Could you hear me?
Yes, we could.
Okay.
Go for it. And then we're going to go to Shauna after Brian.
So I feel that I'm hearing a lot of people saying a lot of things that we all probably feel, that the work that we do, it's not right sized, both in the quantity and the compensation. And it seems that I'd be interested to know how if there's a process or a thought process or anything in terms of how the association can help push this information and this data out into the world, because I feel like often in terms of musicians' relationships in the world, I ask how we're often complicit in our own matrix of disrespect. And I think that it's probably impossible for a non-music person to have any idea that, you know, we're hiring you for 5 hours a week or 7.5 hours a week, and they have no idea what that means or what's possible with that. And it seems like on our end, we could help people right size the expectations and you know, maybe for instance, something that we could, this is just a hypothetical, but possibly we could say every position will have a trial period during which time all the parties involved, the hired person and the congregation and the board, all ascertain what actually is the right size for the job, and whether somebody's overdoing it or whether they're underdoing it or whether they're doing it perfectly and all these kinds of things. I think that that's one of the things that's on the table, because we come in as musicians and we're full of vigor and ideas, and it's a new situation and we can do so much, but that so much is going to take 20 hours a week. And if a congregation only has a budget for 7.5 hours a week, then I mean, you know, there is realities involved in all economic decisions that all congregations make. But I think that the association could help figure out how everyone can figure out what the right thing is to do. And I'm interested, I guess Mark maybe has left us, but I'm wondering, to me, the hourly compensation model, although we know that it's a target and nobody wants to keep track of all their hours when they're doing something creative, but as somebody that also does have a salaried position in the universe, like trying to understand what the amount of hours is per the salary seems like a critical thing, because most of the time somebody would let you work 96 hours a week if you were able and willing to do that. So I guess I'm asking a couple of things, like, does the association have plans to figure out how we can help educate the people that that we're part of the process with, like how long it takes and everything like that? And then also, you know, I'd be interested to think what are better models of compensation if it's not an hourly type situation.
Thank you for that, Brian. The best that I can speak to that as of right now is the realization that people really don't know what y'all do. And that has come up very blatantly in conversations and negotiations with the General Assembly Planning Committee, that there's no acknowledgement of the creative process or what it takes to write charts for a 7-person band, or what it takes to get copyright permissions. So that is in my mind of how do we do that, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I don't know how we do that yet, to put you all out in front of the public and say this is what it looks like. I have an idea of, you know, a monthly guest blog spot that's like a week in the life of a UU music director, where you write a piece, you know, you go through your day. This is what I did. This is the amount of time I spent on emails. This is, you know, at 2:00 in the morning, I had an idea about an arrangement of this song that we could play using cowbells and wine glasses. Or, you know, I got this change from my minister. And I think those kinds of, this is the life that I'm living, is a way to lift up. This is the real work that's happening, and folks don't know it. So that's just one of the ideas that I've had percolating. I see, is Alyssa, is this in response to something that I'm saying right now? Yes, and then we'll go to Shauna.
I've had this come up in two different ways in how to measure the full-time equivalent, right? So I'm salaried, I have a full-time equivalent. However, as that has changed its definition, and we've changed, I've had to sort of size it and scale it, right? And so at one point early on, when we had a choral director retire and the minister wanted us to have a consultant, and our congregation was really mad that we had to have a consultant, but nevertheless I gave a presentation about sort of what I do. What I did was I took one piece of music, just one, and I broke down all the hours that went behind the programming and the delivery of it. So both the time it took to research it, find it, decide to even play that piece of music, tracking down the musicians who were going to play it, writing the arrangement, rehearsing it, the email, but it was just literally one piece of music. And I gave a PowerPoint on that, and that was a game changer. On the other side of it, on the larger measurement end, when our current senior minister came on board, she asked our entire staff to do a time study of our work for 2 weeks, and just to measure how we were spending our time, because it was clear that not just me, but a lot of our staff was over-functioning. We had a culture of over-functioning. Everybody was working harder than they were paid. So I do have the support of a senior minister who gets it, right? So my time study came back that I was X amount of hours over what my full-time equivalent should be. So then we had a conversation about, okay, what can you let go, and what was the least efficient thing, even though it's something, and in this case, it was the family and friends singers. It was the intergenerational singing, because the systems that we had in place and how we worked with parents and children and willingness to commit or not, like it was just taking tons of time to get one piece of music with young people versus what I could get from my more skilled adults. And while it's something that we value, she basically said, look, the congregation needs to learn if they miss something, they're going to need to pay up. So you have my permission. That program just is on hiatus. It doesn't mean it goes away forever. But if people ask you, hey, where did that go? You can say, I was told don't work over hours. So those are two examples of ways to measure that I think I've found useful in this ongoing conversation.
Thank you for that, Alyssa. And I actually love the idea of doing a time study. And I feel like that's something we could very easily do in a virtual setting as a professional development opportunity for membership. So I made a note of that and might follow up with you about what that looked like for you, if that's okay. Shauna, you are up next.
Okay. So various things that, like everything that everybody's been saying resonates greatly. Two things that I wanted to echo was Alyssa earlier talked about not having been to a conference. I've never been to one because I'm part-time pretty much. I would get, it's salaried, but based on the salary, I'm approximately quarter time. So I have a very active gigging life and teaching life. And so I've never been able to go to conferences or GAs or anything. I've been to one regional in New England a couple of years back, and will actually be going to my first GA at least part-time. Because it's in New England and I can drive there and not incur the extra costs of flying and everything. But so I just wanted to echo that the timing of conferences for those of us who are part-time and thus also gigging in other ways does end up that we can't frequently go. Also wanted to echo way back, Mark, in the beginning, talking about small, SAB or sometimes I'm coming up with two-part arrangements because really all I'm going to have is some sopranos and an alto and maybe one bass. And so often, because there's not a lot of repertoire out there that's doable for our choirs once a month. So often I'll end up arranging, but I'm pretty much ending up doing that on my own time because of the part-time nature of the salary. So so a lot of what was said about kind of figuring out a way to present, like, this is what I'm doing, this is how long it takes. I did a bit of that actually a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, as we were talking budget and changing my status from contract independent contractor to finally becoming an employee. And I ended up coming up with the idea that I should just sort of try to detail what I did and approximately how many hours it took. But and that's we have a once a month choir performance, and so rehearsals on Sunday morning beforehand for every week that I'm there.
Thank you for that, Shauna. Mark is waving goodbye to everybody. Mark has to step off, but I hope we see you again, Mark. Hang in there out there. I'm going, who am I? Dana. I saw a hand up from you. The mic is yours.
Can't turn it on. Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I share this concern with the timely hours thing. As an interim director, I'm stepping into I've been stepping into a situation that's kind of unfamiliar to me. And so I haven't really known exactly who to ask about what. Here's the dilemma that I have right now. The church has just posted the quote permanent music director description, and I'm hired now for 15 hours, which is a nice chunk of time and a substantial part of my income. I also gig and teach and have 2 or 3 part-time things going, like most of us do. And in the description, they have added a lot of things to the description that I couldn't possibly do in 15 hours. And they've also cut the pay by 30%. And I was quite alarmed. I spoke with the minister about this, and she actually told the board president that I was concerned, and the board president called me, which was awkward, because then I sort of had to get together with the board president and say, you know, this doesn't really seem right to me. And then, you know, if I want to apply for the job, I feel like I'm in a really awkward position, because I've complained about this, what I feel is an inequity. And I did, you know, my own sort of informal time study and figure my typical week is about 17 hours. And I don't mind putting the extra time in. It's doing stuff that I like, and I feel the compensation is pretty good. But how could anybody do this with 30% less money? I just don't understand. And I don't know how to address it or who to address it with. I've tried, and you know, budgets are budgets. This is what they feel they have to do. I don't know what I have to do.
Bailey, do you have a comment in relation to what Dana has just expressed?
Yeah, Dana, I'm curious only to understand, because I'm taking the UUA's professional interim training right now. Do you feel that the way that they used the word interim when they hired you meant that they were expecting that you'd do some of that sort of systems analysis work that you're clearly raising now on the back end when they're surprising you with how they've described the new position, or were they hiring you more as an acting or temporary?
It wasn't particularly clear either from the job description or for the interviews. I think they expected a little bit of consulting, but not a whole lot. I've certainly had a good relationship with the minister and have talked with her about how to grow and develop the music program and how to make it more coherent. I moved initially to say, well, let's just have the choir sing more often in church from once every 3 weeks to twice a month, and come up with a strategy of how to do that, you know, with everybody kind of coming along, and that's worked pretty well. Other than that, the search committee, when they were trying to get the job description together and figure out what they were doing, a couple of people from there did interview me about what my job entailed and how many hours it took and things like that. But that was the only formal avenue for me to have any input into how the job description goes. And I feel like the search committee is a little bit different from what they called the music visioning committee. I guess that's who I had at the interview with. Sweet, but a little bit ineffective, I think, in terms of the practicalities of the job. I really liked Alyssa's idea of the time study and the PowerPoint. This is exactly what it takes to do this, and this is exactly what it takes to do that. And in order to do the third thing, which is actually sing this thing in church, all of these things have to be done before. I think that would be a really good thing to take to the general conference and educate people a little bit. I wonder if, Alyssa, you'd be willing to do that. You have it already computer. It would be really handy, I think.
Thank you, Dana. I really appreciate that further insight because I definitely feel like this is one of the challenges I'm experiencing in taking the interim training, is that while predominantly, as far as I can tell, in New England, there is a growing model of having an interim DRE. It's a little bit true out of New England. I know that Montclair has an interim DRE right now. Is that correct, Marcus?
Developmental, sorry.
Developmental, yes.
Developmental, okay, so that's slightly different. But even having that, you know, having something that's more on the model of what we're accustomed to with ministers is not only not really the practice within the musicians, but I think for all the reasons that many of you have already named in terms of the gig economy, is probably somewhat less realistic. However, the skills that interim work can provide for a congregation so that someone like Dana would not be put in the position of thinking about the permanent job, but saying, but you didn't do your work, right? Because now the scarcity mindset says that you think you can add more things to the job and cut the salary at the same time, which gets back to things that Brian said and things that Alyssa said as well as what Mark said initially. So that's another thing that I'd like to be working with AUUMM and hear AUUMM supporting, is to think about how those of us developing those interim skills could best support congregations and music directors in doing that kind of analysis and thinking, because I don't think that saying, oh, well, what you need to do is hire a 2-year interim music director is, I mean, who's going to move for a 2-year, 5-hour-a-week, 9-month-a-year interim position? Like, that's just bogus. But the one thing I'd add to that is, it's really clear to me, because I'm now a supporting member of Laurita, is that we need to be much better friends with our religious educator colleagues, because they're getting expletived on every day of the week too. But within that, I would also say that another complexity I see is that predominantly there's an expectation within covenantal behavior that Laurita members would be lifting up the values of Unitarian Universalism at all time, and that they would have to understand how to do that because they are teaching our youth. Whereas in music, sometimes we're so much hired as the, like over here, the hired gun, you're just deliverable, you know, the deliverables are the music on Sunday kind of thing, that we get into this other issue where I'm starting to sense that there's a disrespect of musicians because there's a lack of trust that we're committed to Unitarian Universalism, regardless of whether we self-identify as Unitarian Universalists. So I know I just took this conversation in a whole new direction. Thanks.
Thank you, Data and Bailey. I have no answers for you right now or solutions, but I will tell you that it's a forward-looking possibility with UUA, that there is formal training and an interim ministry program. Loretta does developmental training for their interim professionals, and that's something that Jan Gartner and Sarah Getty McNeil and I have started, that opened the door to that conversation for members of AUUMM as well. So thank you, and I will probably follow up with you about that experience, Dana. I saw Brian Seeger's hand go up before Sarah Jo, so I'm gonna go there, and then Sarah Jo, you're on deck if I can use a sports term, even though no sports are happening right now.
I'm curious that I know that my understanding was that the negotiations between the association and the GA was that any contract was going to have to go through DeRoe or the board. And I'm wondering if that possibly, if the association could have an advisory committee to look at job offerings and to make commentary about whether we thought that the job description was right-sized for both the hours that were needed and the compensation model. Just even if it wasn't that we're going to shut it down like that we're a union, but just to start by offering, like, hey, send us your job descriptions and we're going to vet them with our panel and we're going to give you some feedback on whether we feel that it's, and possibly that might include talking to the person that's currently doing the job or talking to the person that did the job before. There could be some kind of feedback mechanism whereby those of us or those of you that know mostly how it works could report that back to the hiring entity.
Thank you for Brian. I love that. And that's officially in my journal. So I will follow up with all the people who are like, yes, yes, and see if they want to be a member of that committee. Sarah Jo, you're up.
First, I just want to make sure, because Judd said he's leaving. Judd, did you have anything to say, or are you good?
Oh, thank you.
Are you frozen, Judd?
I think there he is.
Yeah, am I there? Well, in my 7 years now with the organization, my work as facilitating the Silliman competition and director of publications, and my involvement with the email list and with people at conferences and stuff, I would say the two, if I had to distill it down to kind of two needs or things that the organization could look to in the future, both in terms of helpful to the members of the organization, but also to the congregations, would be, number one, would be getting new music into the congregations. And number two would be clarity around copyright issues and some coordination with the UUA around that. So I would like to give you a call one of these days, Laurice, and have some discussion about that. And thank you very much for hosting this, and it's good to see familiar faces.
Thank you, Jed. I will follow up and schedule that call with you. And just a little point of reference, my little sister works at the Patent and Trade Office, and I complained to her today about copyright being so wonky. And she says that it's the legislative branch's fault, that copyright lives in the legislature, and that's why it's so messed up. So go to the polls, people. I don't know if that will help, but yes, that is definitely on the radar, Jed. I will follow up with you. Thank you. Sarah Jo.
So some of what I wanted to say was what Jed just said, which is why I thought I'd let him go first. And then also, and I think Laurice, we emailed a little bit about this today, is like the gathering of resources that are out there and putting them in one comprehensive place is something that's been started with the AUUMM, but that needs to be continued. As I know, I reach out to my colleagues, several of whom are on this call all the time, to get answers to things or to give answers as well as I can. But where do we put those answers? Like, the forums aren't really a great place to store answers that we keep asking.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Data processing and gathering and distribution is a challenge in a lot of volunteer organizations, I think, because we do have people who are really gung-ho at first and come on, and then maybe they rotate out. Maybe their hours are dropped at their congregation, or their budget's cut and they're no longer a member with AUUMM. So that is definitely on the radar for me, and I don't have a solution right now, but it's percolating.
I don't expect you to. I'm just putting it out there.
I appreciate it.
The web.
Thank you. That, and the idea of having answers in somewhere that it's not just disappearing. I appreciate that, and that's something we can easily look into, I think. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that in connection to that, again, because I seem to do all these weird things, probably because I'm not actually being paid by anybody to do them. I have been on Facebook more in the last couple of weeks in a group that grew out of Laredo, which is the COVID-19 UU professionals something, right? And I've seen Natasha on there. Maybe I've seen Alyssa. I know I've seen Marcus there. And what's super interesting to me is the potential that we have to remake the wheel literally however many congregations we are at a time. Because on the one hand, this group has been an incredible clearinghouse for creativity, ideas, teaching each other how to use different technologies most effectively, and simultaneously, as of today, there's a new shared Google Doc where people are putting up, like, if they have a poem that they wrote that they're willing to share freely, or a blessing that they wrote that they're willing to share freely, or a piece of music, you can use it anytime, which is super cool. Like, what level of redundancy with Beth Sarverson work on the database is happening every time I say to a clergy person, oh, do you know about the database? They go, the who? And I go, yeah. And then I send them the link and I'm like, you can get into it. You don't have to be a member of AUUMM. So just thinking about that kind of stuff and recognizing that right in this moment, I'm also starting to wonder about, is it always necessary for everybody every Sunday going forward to be doing their own online worship? Do we want to develop clusters? And this week, this congregation is doing the online worship, and then everybody's going back to their own Zooms for their own coffee hours, or what have you. Do ministers in a given area want to take turns who's going to give the sermon? Because y'all are going to be more exhausted than you are. You're going to be like under the floor if we don't figure out how to like take the creativity and harness it into something that's a little more supportive. I don't love the word efficient because I feel like that's such a white supremacy culture word. So I want it to be thoughtful. I want it to be more relational. So I'm wondering about how we all can support you to do that better.
Thank you, Bailey. I see Alyssa's hand up in the corner of my screen here.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to something that Brian raised about vetting potential contracts, which I think is a really interesting idea. I also just want to lift up that when we were going through having a senior minister retire after 27 years, we're approaching an interim. Before he retired, we had a compensation consultant come in and look at the whole church. And we all had interviews with him, and one of the things that he said to me was the two areas that you absolutely cannot standardize across the denomination are music programs and facilities, because they are all so unique and they're so dependent on what the congregation, both just, brick and mortar wise, the facilities are so different. And then, but also what is the culture around music is going to be so different in terms of what the congregation wants, as well as its history, as well as so there's the denominational level. So I do think the idea of vetting is really interesting, but I would just say there might be a need to balance the fact that music directors program A might work really well at church A, but it might not necessarily translate to church B, because I think we all there's some personalities are so unique, and it's part of what's exciting about the artistic work, right? Is that there's a certain infusion of whoever you are in how you approach that work. So I think that's enough on that, but I didn't want to lose track of that thought. But I'm really interested in what you're saying, Bailey, about, I've been feeling that same, like, there's such great content out there. Boy, we're all like reinventing the wheel and then some.
I want to ask a question back, if I may, Alyssa. To what extent do you feel that statement of, oh, everything is unique, facilities and music, is a way to keep not standardizing because it benefits the people who don't want to pay for the content? Because I'm not always sure how different the program should be. And I think I go back to my example that I gave to Mark of, like, how is it that what I was doing and what he's doing, 20 hours versus 7.5, that doesn't math to me. So I'm wondering, do you have any sense when you sort of look at that statement about wanting to unpack it, or are there more thoughts, or do you agree with it fully?
I hadn't thought about it in that way, but it's an interesting thing that you're positing, again, because I've in general started out with a really supportive environment, but a lot of what I inherited, I was hired, the job description said we need somebody who can do Bach to Beastie Boys, and that was based on another music director who had sort of come in when they went from one service to two. It had been a very, what you would call, traditional sacred music choir, kind of, very old school organ and choir service. When they moved to service number 2, we had an equity actor who was also had a master's in piano, and it was him and his network. And so you had you had 2 very, very different services, at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. And then they were duplicating efforts. We're now at the point where we have the same programming at 9 and 11 a.m. Over my time there, I've been able to advocate for fairness in the form, in some ways, in efficiency, right? So that we're not having competing music programming. That was one thing that I found. Some congregations have programs with redundant effort, right? And that's a whole cultural thing. Some churches say, okay, we're going to designate service at this time is always contemporary and service at that time is always traditional. That was the model right before I was hired. And then when I was hired, I was music director number 3, but I was hired to head a program because they were expanding to 3 services. And it was overloading everybody. We're now back to 2 and still pretty, but in a much more reasonable place in terms of how the work is. So I don't know if I'm responding appropriately to that, Bailey, but I mean, so this was all, that conversation was coming out of some unpacking of history there. And I mean, you may be onto something there that may be just too easy to say, but I do sense that in my experience, I did feel like the first conference I went to, when it was AUUMM in Clearwater, that was day 1 of my job. I went to that conference, and I was honestly so disappointed because I felt like I was at a choral directors conference and I wasn't hired to be the choral director, and there was not much of anything there for me. And I did it on my own dime because there was no professional development budget at that time. So this organization sort of started for me in a very strange place. Over time, we actually got a budget in place, but that was given to our choral director. So he was really our primary participant in this organization. I think it served him well. But then he said to me, they're doing stuff with bands now. You might want to go if your summer opens up. And, so I did go to Boston and I went to Portland. So I've just had 3 very, different conferences at different points in time. I've seen the organization shift. But I do feel like I've often felt like this doesn't apply to me in a lot of the sessions, which makes me feel like, yeah, my program felt unique by comparison to what else I was learning. And yet there were things that were universals in my conversations with others, like the one we're having right now. There's a lot of universal experiences here for sure.
Thank you, Alyssa. We are coming up on 10 to 10, which means we've been here for a little over an hour. I'm happy to stay on with folks, but I want to give the opportunity for anyone who hasn't spoken up to share something that they feel is valuable for me to hear. I'm not going to force anybody, but I see no hands. So if anyone has some clothing thoughts, yes, please tell me all about fashion. Closing thoughts for the evening. I would love to hear from you. Again, this is going to be an ongoing opportunity. Probably quarterly. I don't know that, because I am hearing you all say that you want respect of your hours and your boundaries. I will do my best to model good boundaries, and I am a half-time position. So probably quarterly, you're going to see this kind of town hall style meeting happening. But please know that my door is metaphorically open always. So if there is something that we can do for you, please put it on my radar. You will be hearing more from the board soon in regards to multi-professional organizational outreach. That's a mouthful. I will be meeting with the leaders of Loretta and the Ministers Association tomorrow to talk about how we can work together and collaborate and utilize resources better during this very uncertain time. So I love to hear those ideas about, sharing worship service and such. And I definitely encourage you during this time. It's like you can live stream and Netflix binge watch UU services all over the country right now. So I definitely encourage you to get online and see what your colleagues are doing, and not get intimidated by, there are some big congregations that have more money that are putting up some pretty fancy Hollywood style streaming services right now, but there's a lot of magic happening in the smaller congregations also. Do I have anything else I need to share with you right now? I don't think I do. So this recording is going to be publicly available. I will put the Loretta, sorry, we got lost in alphabet soup a little bit. This will be available to folks who weren't able to join us tonight, which several people reached out to me asking about. If there are any problems with anything that you shared, please let me know so I can edit that. But otherwise, I will see you in a couple of months. FYI, the conference is moving forward as of right now. We are planning and making movement that things are going to be okay come July. Registration will be opening. Yes, I see all of the faces. I feel that a little bit too.
I'm just like, are you simultaneously making plans to have it be 100% virtual? Because then so many more people like Alyssa.
So many more people will come, but that's also,
I'm not sure we're going to want to travel then.
That's also something that we want to do. So a clinician has been identified, and registration will be opening this weekend. And the silver lining is that flights to Detroit are super cheap right now. So if there's anything we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out. And like I said, I'm happy to keep this room open if anybody wants to stick around and chat or catch up. Or if you need to speak with me, I'm happy to stay on as well. Otherwise, I'll unmute you all. So there's a collective, like it's Brady Bunch on my screen right now. We can say goodnight Walton style.
You're too much, Laurice.
Yeah, you're right.
Night. Night.
Night, everyone.
Thanks.
Night.
Night.
Good night.
You all stay
Night.
safe, be well.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Wash your hands.
Wash your keyboards, please. Sterilize your keyboards.
Phone.
Wash your keyboards.